What are common bone fractures in a pedestrian accident? I'm Jim Dodson. You know, as a lawyer, I see a lot of pedestrian injuries. Sadly, when a car is going more than 45 miles an hour, typically the pedestrian doesn't have a very good chance of even surviving. Fortunately, many crashes occur below those speeds, but what happens is the pedestrian ends up with a fracture of some type. Probably one of the most common types is where the bumper meets the pedestrian first, which means the lower leg, the tibula, fibula, what we call a tib-fib fracture. Sometimes the ankle, many times where the knee joint meets, what they call the tibial plateau, used to be called the bumper injury, and then the femur. On the upper body, when the pedestrian is thrown, you end up with fractures of the arms, clavicle, sometimes the spine, and many times of course of the head. Now, fractures really kind of come into two broad categories. You have open and closed. An open fracture is where the bone breaks through the skin, and in a closed fracture, that doesn't happen. They're also displaced and non-displaced. A displaced fracture means the bone fragments are separated and no longer in alignment. And a non-displaced fracture, they stay relatively in good alignment. When you have a fracture of this type, of any of these types, particularly where there is an open fracture, there's a possibility of all types of complications. One of the most common is, particularly with an open fracture, is that you get germs from the road and other places into the bone, and you have an infection known as osteomyelitis, which is a very serious and hard to treat infection. You can also get nerve and tissue damage around any fracture. So any of these injuries are serious. They need to be treated as serious injuries, and they result in serious complications for anyone who's unfortunate enough to end up in the path of a car when one of these things happen.